Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
Hello and welcome to No Password Required, a podcast dedicated to exploring the minds and personalities that make up the field of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Ernie and with me as always, Jack Clabby, a cybersecurity attorney at Carlton Fields, PA in Tampa. On the podcast today, we will chat with Hannah Sutor, Senior Product Manager at GitLab and a digital privacy advocate with At the Privacy Chick. Hannah often spends her workdays creating balance among developer accessibility, user experience, and security. When she's not thinking about the nuts and bolts of digital privacy, she can be found outdoors enjoying the crisp Colorado air. Hannah, we look forward to a great conversation. But first, hello to my co-host, Jack Clabby. Good day to you, sir.
Good day to you, Ernie. It's pumpkin spice latte season here. I'm just trying to, work out every day, get ready for Thanksgiving.
Well, you got to
make sure I look my best.
You got to. That's right. You got to wearing warm layers, especially down here where the temperature drops into the low 70s during the day here. That could be tough. And like you said, pumpkin spice lattes. We're going to talk more about those as we get into the future, but I don't want to offend people, but I'm not a pumpkin spice latte person. I'm not going to lie.
All right, well, we got to talk about a meeting that happened at the White House in October, and I don't think any pumpkin spice or PSL was served there.
You
but
probably
got together some of the White House cyber officials with FCC and representatives and a few folks from private industry. But the conversation was about a potential rating standard, well, not a rating standard, but a disclosure regime for internet connected devices that may be coming in 2023. This is a product that was maybe announced about a year ago when the FTC and I think NIST were involved in looking at it. But the idea was now you've got web connected thermostats, you've got web connected refrigerators, which is the one that I always love talking about the most. And you also have devices that have commercial applications that are web connected that don't immediately have, obvious advantages to being internet connected. And there's no real regulation of this other than, sort of general consumer standards that may apply to devices like this. So the proposal from the executive branch is essentially a QR code or a barcode that would be on any internet connected device you might encounter in the wild, and would allow the user to scan it and learn information about the product, in particularly, whether it conforms and how to a standard that may be set in the future by NIST or some other standard setting body. So it's a regime that's, designed to tell us just what is this vacuum cleaner collecting about us and how is the vacuum cleaner software keeping that data safe.
Beyond the dust from my floor, what else is this thing collecting?
Yeah. So it's a little, other countries have taken a different approach. Some other countries have, instead of saying disclose what your product is doing with the data, they actually have standards. It'll say, do this or don't do that. If a company is going to have a device, it's going to be internet connected, there's going to be a standard. It's going to say, do or don't follow these prescriptions. And there's pros and cons to that, right? The big pro is you actually have a safer product if you believe the standard. The con is any standard that you can, pass in a democratic way is going to be almost immediately obsolete by the time you get it passed. And so it's that general tension. And so the US approach is going to be, do whatever you want with it, but you just have to tell people what's happening, a disclosure-based approach. There'll be some standard, but it won't be a requirement to meet it. It'll just be disclosure as to how you're doing it. And the comparison model for this is what the US, I think it's the Department of Energy, had for that Energy Star product. It's a number that appears on, like, again, that same refrigerator, and you can compare two refrigerators side by side, and a larger number tells you one thing and a smaller number tells you another thing. They're trying to sort of create a similar, single dynamic with more information behind it for the Internet of Things. Which, again, it's probably better than nothing, maybe. I don't know. But Ernie, what do you think? Is it introducing more problems?
Generally speaking, I think it's in the right direction so that consumers are more aware of what they're going to be buying. I mean, here's the thing. So you mentioned refrigerators. What happens when if I'm the manufacturer of my plain old regular unconnected refrigerator, I'm gonna say that, listen, this is the highest cyber security score refrigerator. Why is that? Because it's not even connected to the internet. There's no electronics in it, so it can't be hacked because there's nothing to hack.
That's right.
So it's number one.
It's also made out of lead in the 70s.
Exactly.
And, Indiana Jones can hide within that refrigerator and survive a nucker blast.
Exactly. And you can't eat any of the food coming out of it because of said lead. But when we get into the implementation of it, I just think it's funny. You scan the QR code, and as we know, QR codes nowadays are like picking up USBs from trade shows. You got to be careful about what travels with the connected to the QR code. So I can just imagine if you're, hey, this is a Energy Star for cyber rated product made in Vladivostok, and you click on it, and next thing you know, congratulations, you're beaming all your data back to the former Soviet Union.
I love that. Okay, so that's the irony, right? I'm standing in a big box retailer, and I'm standing in front of a barbecue that is an internet connected barbecue, and I've got two of them I like, and they both have QR codes and ratings, and I have to take out, in order to learn more, I take out another internet connected device, my phone, take a picture of a website that I have no way of verifying other than it's on a sticker at a retail establishment.
Exactly.
And I've got to do this twice. And I've got to tombstone my two reviews, and I've got to look at them, and I've got to compare the two reviews. So yeah, I don't know if more internet is the solution to, it's like,
that's right. Well, because
freedom of speech. It's like more speech is the solution.
Here,
let's make this poor user whose internet stuff, whose barbecue purchase is going to be collecting a whole bunch of barbecue related data about them and location data.
That's right.
And make them tell that company that they connected with this device on this date in that store,
looking at their bar at their particular grill. And if they're not, and oh, by the way, they'll probably also get notified that they did look at your competitor's grill as well.
And you're going to start getting grill related advertisements. And I wonder, like in California, where they have the CCPA and the CPRA set up, is that are you going to have to get a notice at collection that tells you, by scanning this QR code, I'm collecting this data about you, including location data? I mean, I get what they're trying to do. As far as I know, with Energy Star, it's just a number. It's not a number and a QR code that would collect more data about you. But this is just the idea that we're going to create a privacy disclosure regime that is going to collect more data than if it didn't exist is great. I don't know what.
And I also wonder, because so part of the benefit for the Energy Star was that you could use that if you purchase. There was tax breaks and other incentives that go along with that. Are they going to? Is that where this is? Because the idea is if I'm a company, why would I do this?
Yeah,
why would I add this? And then the other part. I mean, I'm thinking about this, Jack. If one is the best, let's just say, and my product is a 1, and somebody installs that in their home, and oh, by the way, I'm number 1, but that becomes the entry vulnerability to their network, and it's because of that. Hey, wait a minute, you guys said you were a 1, but how'd they get in through it?
That's right. So you're getting, that's the problem with it. Well, the disclosure regime, right? And they're gonna, any lawsuit that follows that will be arguing that you told us it did this. In fact, it did not do that. Or you told us it did this, and it did do that, but that wasn't high enough to meet a standard of care. So there's the two theories you could bring in. Yeah, you're just creating electronic data. Now the FCC is involved in this, and they've taken the position that they have the ability to regulate certain aspects of the electronic communication marketplace, which may or may not include the internet. But if you if you look at the bottom of like a hair dryer, it'll have some already standard warnings and disclosures about frequencies, for example, if it communicates on certain trees. So there are existing disclosure regimes that have some sort of legal theory behind them. Some are voluntary, some are required. And so the FCC, the FTC, and a number of other in the Department of Energy probably all are behind the scenes vying for who's going to be the one to put this program out, or they might be aware of the risks of a program like this and be vying to have it. Yeah, exactly. Everyone, whoever remains standing, everyone backs up or whatever it is. Step forward if you volunteer for the mission, and everyone backs up.
That's
but
right.
But I wonder. I mean, look, at the core of this is a problem, and the problem
Yes.
is consumer mistrust. Which is well placed, I think, to some degree, with the interconnectivity of devices. But the idea that I need to have a username and password to operate a barbecue grill seems bananas, right?
Yeah.
It seems a little bananas. And I think about now, like when you bought a car even 15 years ago. I mean, that's the ultimate connected device, is a car, just because of its own destructive potential. You bought a car 10, 15 years ago, you didn't ever need a username or password. Now, if you buy any car, you need a username and password to get access to a whole bunch of stuff and functionality in your car. So it's moving in that direction. Maybe what these consumer advocacy groups should simply say is, how about have a device, have some functionality on this internet connected device that turns it off and that allows me to operate it without it. That may be a better solution to, or at least, consumers should demand that, when they're out there shopping for connected barbecue grills.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of turning things off, we're going to turn this off and turn on to our next segment. So we'll take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to talk to Hannah about her passions for people and privacy and where they eventually intersected. So stick around.
Looking for more no password required content? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at No Password Pod.
All right, welcome back. Our guest is Hannah Sutor, Senior Product Manager at GitLab. Hannah, welcome to No Password Required.
Hi, Ernie. Thanks. Really happy to be here.
Hannah, can you walk us through your career path a little bit, where you got started in, having an interest in sort of this subject matter, and then how it led you to your current role at GitLab?
Yeah, sure. So I went into college undecided. I thought maybe I would major in journalism because I was the editor of my high school newspaper, or pharmacy because, I heard they make good money. So whenever you go in undecided, they force you to take classes kind of from all over the board. And I had to take one in the computer science space, never thinking that it would turn into anything. But I took an intro to information science class, and I liked what I heard, particularly from a influential, awesome female professor. And anytime we do, like for International Women's Day, like name a woman that changed the course of your life, she's the one I always use. So she was awesome. And I ended up declaring it as my major. After school, I went into consulting in the software space, starting out in QA or quality. Within a couple years in quality, I was promoted to lead and kind of thought, like, is this it? What's next? Because there's just not that much, nowhere else to go really in QA from there. So I asked my boss if I could write code with the understanding that I would hopefully be productive quickly and learn on the job. It wasn't like I needed to go out and be gone for some training or anything. I would just learn on the job. So they gave me the opportunity. And it was super heads down. I don't think it's always like this anymore. After all, this was a long time ago, and it was the company culture. But after being heads down, I started to ask more questions, like, why are we doing this certain feature? Which customer is interested? Can I talk to the customer? And after asking that enough times, I had the product people be like, maybe you would be a good product manager. So that's where I am today. And I feel like it's a really good fit with business and the technical.
To go back to that class that sort of put you on this path, what was it about the teacher's engagement that got you thinking, well, this is where I might want to be as opposed to journalism or pharmacy? How did it affect you?
Yeah, so what she really did a great job of was helping me understand how being in tech has an influence and makes a difference on people, right? So sure, technology is cool. We like the latest and greatest shiny thing. That's human nature. but where does tech meet human needs, and where does it actually fit into the real world? And understanding that once we find a fit for how tech applies in the real world, that we can really apply it at scale, and realizing that potentially one person can make an app that millions of people download, for example. So I think the scale of the human being able to influence humanity, hopefully in a positive way, was really intriguing for me, and not something I ever thought of when I thought about tech.
Do you think about design in everyday things as well as design when you're thinking about a product? Like if you're like going to purchase like a pair of scissors, are you thinking about it? Can you turn that part of your brain off when you're in the regular world?
No, I can't. I feel like more for me, more than anything, it's efficiency. So I'm always thinking of like, what ways could we be more efficient and faster and things like that. So I feel like I tend to more towards the efficiency side of usability more than anything. But yeah, that's definitely always plaguing me.
It's like the tension that happens between, so we're talking about username and password right now. That's the credential pair is what most people do when they're logging into a web-based email account or a software application that they need to use for their job, or, you know, if they want to go and order a pizza, they've got to use the username and password pair. It's easy, but it's got problems. What do you think will eventually replace that username and password pair, if there is anything?
Yeah, so I think the exciting part about this is that this is already happening. And it's standard by FIDO, which is kind of a big tech alliance that develops standards. And the passkey standard has officially been developed, and it took almost a decade, but as of this year, we finally have Microsoft, Apple, and Google all bought into adopting the passkey standard. And kind of what this is that it's a hardware factor that you already use to unlock your phone, for example, or whether you use a PIN, face scan, your thumbprint. Basically, the act of doing that will log you into other services that support passkey. So it will take a while for this to be, I think, broadly adopted. But I think it's much more secure than a username and password because it is a hardware factor rather than a soft factor like a password. And it's really exciting. And I feel like this is just a new development as of this year. But I've even seen it as the year has progressed. I've seen it gain steam now and more articles, and Apple, Microsoft, and Google really talking about it and publishing a lot in terms of their support for it as well.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I was just, it's funny, I spend too much time thinking about strange things. As I was unlocking my iPhone with my face, I started to think from that, how that really verifies that, in fact, it was me who is unlocking the phone. So now it's adding, in addition to the, the security of it, but it's also adding a component of identity management, that it is, in fact, I mean, it's, unless somebody's going to have unless Jack could probably pass for me, maybe, but he is a better looking guy. But it, from that aspect of it, it's also that physical thing saying that, yes, it is in fact, it's correlating to a person, as opposed to where before, it was just whoever entered the data into the computer. So I'm just wondering am I talking crazy there, or is that an additional component to this?
No, and I mean that it is true, and that's part of the reason why it is more secure, because you're actually validating that the person's standing there. And I have seen some, I guess I'd call it more of an edge case. Particularly, there was a crypto startup that went around to different countries and was scanning people's retina in exchange for some crypto called WorldCoin. And it was kind of a scandal because they were doing this only in third world countries where people were really intrigued by this coin that was technically not even worth anything. And it was like, what are they doing with all of this biometric data? But I heard that what people were doing in some cases were trying to fool and get WorldCoin by putting like a fake person. I don't know whether it's like a sort of 3D printout of a person's face trying to get more WorldCoin, and they had to actually adapt that and put some sensors in to actually check that somebody has they did a temperature sensor to check, like, is that actually a human standing there at 98.7 or whatever the body temperature is supposed to be. So yeah. I think I think if you compare it to the username and password, it's so much more secure. Is it perfect? No, but it's a lot more secure.
Yeah, I think you're right, because there's been, even with the, I remember when we first started with fingerprints and thumbprints. That was the big thing that, oh yeah, people are going to spoof because they see too many cop and James Bond movies. But how long do you think it's going to take to get there?
I think that these companies that have very like technical users who are very security conscious, such as like GitLab, for example, we primarily have software engineers as our users. I think we are going to need to adopt this rather quickly because they will demand so. And I think some other companies that are have maybe a lower risk in terms of the data they're collecting, I think they're going to be the later adopters, but probably very technical products that have technical audiences, credit card companies. I know there are some companies today that force multi-factor, and that was kind of a big deal to see if audiences would be okay with that. And actually, it's taken time, but it's been very successful. So I wonder if eventually passwordless will be the standard, at least in more high risk things like banking, credit card, filing your tax return, things like that.
Yeah, it's like the pushback on some of that multi-factor authentication is that it's, if it's going to send you a ping to a phone, or if it's going to send you a ping to an email address, then the user needs to track either another device or needs to track another email account and password pairs for those things. So it can, when a software as a service or a platform requires instant engagement, they're just putting 30 seconds or 20 minutes, between the user and the platform. It's pretty hard. But that's not the case for something like what you're describing, where it's a bank, where we have, or it's a highly technical piece, as opposed to social media or something like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There's a difference between the two.
What on Instagram, you have the persona privacy check. What can you tell us about that and where that came from and what you do with that?
I started the privacy check Instagram probably a couple months ago now. And I've taken being in digital identity as my day job. Privacy is obviously a part of that. I feel that right now it's only a small part, but it should be bigger. And I'm concerned with my digital footprint. And I felt like I can't be the only one. But sometimes I sort of felt like I was the only one. So I thought, what's a low barrier way to get my message out there? And I realized the irony of being concerned about my digital footprint and posting on Instagram. And prior to the privacy check, I hadn't posted on Instagram in almost 3 years. So I definitely had some hesitations about that. But I also felt like if it's between Instagram and like starting a blog, I'm never going to write a blog post every day. I don't have that kind of time. As much as I would like to start a podcast in the space, I've tried before. I knew I wasn't going to continually keep up with that, but like 10 or 20 minutes a day dedicating to an Instagram post, like, yeah, I can do that. So I thought it was a low barrier way to share some of what I'm learning about privacy and hopefully doing some advocacy work in terms of, I really think people should care more about this, and kind of providing people why on why they should care. So.
Why do you think it's so hard to get people to care about privacy issues? Your thoughts on why you think it's so hard to get people to believe, yeah, you should listen, you shouldn't run around the internet with no clothes on. Nobody wants to see you there, especially if you want to keep your teaching job. Now, that, by the way, that was a reference to Weird Science at the end, where I'd like you to keep this between ourselves. I'd hate to lose my teaching job. That's one of but anyway. So.
Gosh, I think it's multifaceted. I think part of it is thinking that, it's already so far gone that there's really, at this point, like they already know everything about me. All of that data has already been sold to however many companies, like what can I possibly do about that now? So I think that's part of it. I think part of it is thinking like, I'm not really that interesting. I'm not doing anything super secretive online. So, they can have my information. And then I think a third part of it is some of the things we get as a result of the targeted data is beneficial to us. Like Yeah, are those targeted ads? Would I rather see those, or would I rather see ads for things I don't care about? Or like,
Yeah.
cool, they showed me a coupon code for a website I was on. Now I just saved $10. Like, that's not all bad. So I think there's there's some benefit we get out of it as well.
Sort of put this sort of thought experiment out there, like, all right, complete this idea. Like, data privacy in the US would be better if all the big tech companies voluntarily did blank.
I think if all big tech did a do not track by default rather than track. So right now you're sort of automatically opted in to tracking. And I think it would be better if we started out with not tracking as the default. And if you do want those coupon codes and whatnot, and that's an equal trade-off for you, go ahead and opt in. And this principle is called privacy by default. I don't think it's practiced by many companies right now. And I think that's because in the US, there's really no incentive to until perhaps there's more privacy legislation passed.
Yeah, we think there's probably more incentive for companies to keep it open, meaning you have to opt out because again, people they're mining that data. That's for some, that's their that's their primary bread and butter. Yeah,
billions of dollars, billions of dollars of industry right there. Yeah.
Yeah. The default regime in the US is not do or don't do this particular thing. It's requires the users of, or the collectors of the data to disclose what they're doing. So it's a disclosure regime rather than a prohibitive one that says do or don't do this with the data. So that the suggestion you made, Hannah, is still a disclosure regime. It just says, you can do it, but before you do it, you need to have them opt in. It's an opt-in versus opt-out. So it would be in line with what we're already doing. It wouldn't be really radical. And everyone has a technology. If you have opt-out technology, you can make it opt-in.
Yeah. But I think that's the same standard that we see with just even security controls on systems. It's a lot of things it's all open and you have to shut things down, as opposed to you got it, you turn it on and you have to open things up. So it's
one thing I showed on the privacy chick that seemed to resonate with a lot of people is, the cookie consent banner that's on pretty much every website. Yeah. Most have a way to reject non-essential cookies. And yes, some of them you have to click 4 levels deep and it's annoying. Other ones make it easy from the get-go to reject non-essential cookies. But people didn't know that you could reject those and still use the website. Like,
oh, wow.
People were like, oh, I thought I had to click accept or else I couldn't go on the website. So even just something as basic as that, I think people don't even understand the options available to them.
Yeah, and I think that some of them are deceiving on that too. That pop up that comes in, because it only really kind of gives you one option: click here to accept, and then, or if you don't, there's no way to. I don't want to accept. How do I go from that?
Yeah, there's some. I've seen some, and I try to shout them out on my Instagram when I see them. That will give you the option that just says like use only essential cookies, and I'm like, thank you. Like you're making this better you're making the internet better. Thank you.
It should be like some kind of program like privacy heroes of the internet. And I mean, but that's what's nice about your Instagram. You can do that. You can shame people, but you can also say, all right, here's a company who's doing it right.
Yes. And I do think there are some companies trying to do it right. So I do try to shout them out when I see them.
We heard a little bit about an adventure you had. We want to just ask you about it. After your daughter was born, you and your husband decided to make a pretty significant life change. Can you tell us about your RV journey?
Yes. So we were both sort of born and raised in the same town in the Midwest and never really traveled much growing up. But having a child will rock your world, as any parent can attest. And I think we all have different reactions to how that manifests. And ours happened to be like, hey, what do we want more of in life? Is this going to be the same pattern we follow forever? This is the same sort of life we've been living. And so whenever we thought about what we wanted more of, we wanted more experiences and we wanted less things. So we thought about how could we manifest that, and came across some people doing the RV life thing on YouTube. It was I was the one pushing for this, and my husband was like, absolutely not, no way. But I managed to convince him. And yeah, we sold our house, sold almost everything we owned. I still have photos. Obviously, I gave a lot away too, of like the trash bags like piled up on my front porch waiting for the Vietnam vets to come get it. And yeah, we moved into a motorhome and we traveled the country for 16 months.
What were some of the things that you learned while on the road? I mean, they can be like the philosophical aspect of it, experiences beyond that, or, the other part can be, make sure the chemical toilet is emptied before you go over the mountain pass or something like that.
Yeah, I think I learned that there's something to like in every place. So some of the places we stayed, little town in the middle of the country right off the interstate, right? Like what's there to find to like there? But I think we found ourselves finding something like cute or intriguing or interesting about almost everywhere we stayed, which was a good lesson that good things, can be found everywhere. You just kind of have to look for them. I think driving an RV over a big RV, especially over mountain passes, is terrifying. The amount of times, oh my God, I just remember, especially the first time we were driving, we came from Pennsylvania, so we headed south through West Virginia, and there's some significant mountain passes there, and we were in this, big old motorhome, and the brakes were smelling so bad, and the brakes were overheating, and I remember like I went to bed that night and my jaw was so sore from being so tense. So yeah, that is not fun. We eventually switched to a fifth wheel in a truck, which handled the mountain passes a lot better, but that old motorhome was terrifying. And I'm trying to think. I think lastly, I took a step back from work when we did the RV thing. And I thought, I'm going to experience freedom and like, I'm never going back to a desk job. And like, this is going to be the start of, something new for me. And I think I realized that having some routine in my day and having like regularly using my brain at a certain level, regularly feeling like I accomplished something, those were all things that I did find in my work. And so I think I came back to work with a whole new attitude, and it wasn't one of like, oh yeah, I'm only going back because I need the paycheck. It was like, I'm going back because I want to, and because this is how I operate best as a human. So it really, I didn't expect that at all, but it gave me a whole new perspective on working.
Is the RV lifestyle still part of who you are now? Like, do you take vacations that way now, or is that something that was something you experienced once and right now it's backburnered?
So we've tried to sort of continue the RV thing. We bought a van, just a Chevy Express, like camp van, 12 passenger, like a big van. And we started converting it into a camper van over COVID. And we've taken some trips with it, but we found honestly that we've had to sell our large RV, and it's almost like at this point, we think it would be better to either have an RV that has some real comforts, which our van is pretty much just like a rolling bed, or just go simple and go tenting. And that way you can hike in and have much more beautiful scenery than you can have at like a campground. So I think we're still trying to find our perfect balance post RVing.
I can attest that tenting, while probably nice out in the Rockies, down here in Florida, you've got a very narrow window. Other than that, you're practicing your how to survive on Guadalcanal during World War II. It's like jungle warfare down. You just pray for the weekend to end so you can get to someplace cool, because you're soaking wet from mosquitoes and all the other.
We talk about how many unzipping of the tents does it take to get mosquito equilibrium on the inside and the outside.
Oh my gosh.
It's about 5. Yeah.
And that's from a scientific study.
Oh my gosh, is it really?
Yeah. Jack got a lot of experience. That's the thing. Yeah.
All right. As a bunch of Florida people here, we thought like the Starbucks pumpkin spice latte was really the gold standard, Hannah. Then we heard about a Colorado version that we didn't even know was possible. Can you tell us about your preferred pumpkin spice latte?
Okay, this makes me laugh because I didn't realize it was so unique. So I will go if I love a pumpkin spice latte in the fall. No shame in that game, but I will not get it if it's just like the bottled syrup, like the pumpkin flavored syrup. Instead, I ask these coffee shops if they make their own pumpkin. And, it's about 50-50 whether they do or they don't, but the ones that make their own pumpkin syrup, roast pumpkin and kind of like distill it down into and blend it and do add some sweetener, but then they make it into something that, that you can put in a pumpkin latte and sort of, you drink your latte and then after it's done, you can still sort of see it on the cup a little bit because it's not just like, it has a little bit more thickness to it than just a flavored syrup. So it's actually made from real pumpkin and it's not nearly as sweet. And that's really the way to go.
Oh, I got to try this. I think I want to I want to make this. One of listeners of the podcast will know that I spent a lot of COVID making like artisanal alcoholic drinks and mixers and then making non-alcoholic drinks for my kids. And so I think this is something we can do this weekend. So I have an idea of how I would do it already and I will report back on how
I think it might be very popular in Florida because people love it. Like everyone, all of my friends seek out the same thing. It's like, we don't bother unless it's a homemade pumpkin.
All right. Well, we're going to work on that. One more question a little bit about the work culture where you are now. It's asynchronous, I think. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of working in an asynchronous sort of work environment?
Yeah, so you're right. GitLab operates fully async. And for example, my immediate team I work with of, let's say, 10 or so people, we've never once actually had a team meeting where we're all there. And it's because being around the world, we're a fully distributed team as well. There's no one time where we could all make it. So I think one of the benefits I really seen is this forces us to document. We take very thorough notes on every meeting, we record every meeting, and that way someone can catch up. And a lot of times what I do is I just record myself talking and I'm not even in a meeting, but it's just, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Can you give me some feedback? Share my screen, and then we work from there. So that way there's always notes to refer back to, I think, which is helpful because it's so easy to forget exactly what was said. And disadvantages is sometimes things take a little bit longer. So we don't expect our coworkers to immediately respond to a message on Slack. Like it might be a day, it might be 2 days. But we think that this trade-off is worth it for what the lifestyle that it gives us in terms of not feeling like we constantly have to be on and having more flexibility in our days. And then the fact that everything is documented, we're very transparent. So by default, we actually share everything publicly. So our customers can go and see exactly what our roadmap is, which is pretty rare. They can see, if they want to, speaking of privacy, they can see all the comments I make on different issues every day. And that also comes with its own cost because some customers know all they have to do to get a hold of me is to tag me in an issue and I'll respond. So I think that it all has its pros and cons.
I love that idea though of like having a transparent work environment like that and thinking of the project you're working on as being just as much yours and your team's as it is your customers, right? That you're giving that kind of almost direct service and transparent service is really unique.
Yeah, and it saves us a lot of time too, because all we do is point at, if I justified why, let's say something is going to miss a release and going to take longer, and I'll comment and say, here's why this took longer than we thought, and here's the new scheduled date for it, rather than having to, reach out to every customer and communicate that, they can all just be tuned into that one issue and all see the same thing.
All right, well, after a short break, we'll return with Ernie's lifestyle polygraph. So please stay with us.
You're listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
All right, welcome back. Hannah, are you ready for the lifestyle polygraph?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, yes. So our listeners know this is typically used as a tool to determine people's eligibility to have access to some of our nation's most sensitive secrets. But here, we just try to use it to probe the minds of our guests on the show. So it's a series of 5 questions. And we're going to start here, and here's the first one. Question number 1. If our show were to do a year on an RV tour, okay, I just got to caveat that by saying that I'm looking forward to spending a year in an RV with Jack and Rex and Serena and the whole crew. What are some of the things that we should see or do?
Okay, so I guess this one is more in the do category, but I would say do get a setup where you can be comfortable off grid. This definitely opens up your options, especially if you come out west, which you should if you have a year. There's a lot of BLM land, which belongs to US citizens, and anyone can camp on it for free. The catch is that there's no trash service, there's no water hookups, there's no electricity, but this is really no problem if you have the right RV that can keep you comfortable with water tanks, a generator, whatnot. So I would say get an off-grid capable RV and make sure you pack it out and leave no trace. It's an important part of being a good steward of our public lands. And places. So I think Arizona, Sedona, the Grand Canyon. I'd never seen the Grand Canyon before. That was like, honestly, the beauty of that moved me to tears, which is something that's never happened to me before. So that I just thought that was so incredibly beautiful. And there's BLM land 10 minutes outside of the park where you could park your RV, and so you can be nice and close. One of my other favorites was, you may be familiar, was Topsail Hill Preserve State Park. In Santa Rosa Beach, which is near Destin. And I thought definitely go there in the RV for the most beautiful, unspoiled beach because it is a state park. They have it, completely undisturbed the whole way up to the shoreline, so you get to see what the native forests are like there. And it's really beautiful with super clear water. And my last thing to do would be, I think RVing across the country is a really great time to visit people you don't normally get to see. We stopped and saw great aunt and uncle I'd never met, and ended up staying with them for a week. And I think the greatest part is, you still have your own space because you're in the RV, and then they have their own space and you can still meet for dinner or whatever. So it's just a really great way to travel.
I think Ernie, we should do this, and we should build it around like DEF CON in Vegas and try to get from Florida there, even if we only did it for a month.
I think we're on to something here. I'm picturing the no password required RV. Of course, it's probably going to look like Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation. See that there's an RV.
Hey, Hannah, what's your are you using like satellite internet? Like, how do you get on the internet if you're off like that?
Keep in mind, we RV'd in 2017, and actually things have changed a lot since then. We had a couple unlimited data plans via cell provider.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And maybe one that would have coverage in one area didn't have coverage in another. So that's why we had 2. But from the RVers, we still follow. Apparently Starlink is the way to go. So. Okay.
All right, that was the only barrier to me, Ernie. So I'm on.
Yeah, I think we're on to something here. I can see it coming.
I guess that defeats the purpose of being off the grid, though, if we're reachable the whole time.
Well, I tell you what, Jack. I think it's going to be cool. I mean, with that shirt, that plaid shirt, I think you'll fit right in. I mean, out here in the wilderness, lumberjack look. For those of us who are listening and not watching us, actually, you know what? My shirt is so loud today that it may actually be maybe picked up by the audio recording. I think you're right. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Clappy. Okay, question number 2. What's the best work-related day you've ever had?
One comes to mind that was recent. So recently I did my first ever public speaking at a conference in Chicago. It was one of my goals for myself for the year. And the whole morning, my curtain call wasn't until 1 p.m. So I had to spend the whole morning being like horribly nervous, and that was horrible. But the rest of the day made up for it. And I guess the first factor in that was just like the palpable relief of being done, and also doing something where I felt like I really challenged and pushed myself. That's a feeling I don't do often enough, but something I really enjoy. And then the second part is that, so at GitLab, we're all remote. We have about 2,000 coworkers, most of which I've never met. But in Chicago, there was about 8 GitLab employees at this conference. So I got to meet 8 of my coworkers, and they were cheering me on in the audience, which was really nice. And then the other aspect of that is that I also spent some time working the booth. We had a booth there. So I got to talk to people who use our software, and being on the side of the builder, being the builder of the software, it feels like a lot of the time we get back either complaints or feature requests. And it often feels like, no matter what you build, it's never good enough, and customers are always going to want more. So actually being able to have those conversations where we get to understand, hey, like our software is being used to build really important stuff. And like, again, going back to that sort of human connection and making a difference and getting a feel that your work every day does matter, was really validating. And I was really grateful for that.
It's true. It's like you can think if you're only interacting with squeaky wheels, I mean, because that's the part of the job or part of the role, there's 90% of the folks who are using it every day and are thrilled by it aren't going to reach out with a positive message. So that's a great idea to put yourself in positions where you can get positive reinforcement from time to time.
Yes, that is very important. And I was sure to take back, the positivity back to my team and sort of let them know as well, because I think, in engineering, you can also just be so in the day-to-day development of features, and you don't really get that feedback loop of hearing that anyone's happy with it or using it. So I wanted to bring that back to them as well.
I do breach response services, Hannah, and I only hear from people when they're in crisis. I never. And so people are like, oh, if I'm talking to you, Jack, I'm sick to my stomach. So I got to figure out a way to like talk to clients I've worked with in the past who are not experiencing a breach. Hey, Jack, good to not talk to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. But that's cool that you were able to get out and listen to some people who are happy users.
Yeah, it was really nice.
I'm just going to say something, Jack. You left yourself wide open right there. People say, Jack, when I talk to you, I'm sick to my stomach. It's sad because those are his friends. Those are the people that he likes. That likes.
It's true.
I don't.
It's not that I don't like you. It's I associate you with things that are bad.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. No, that's exactly. Yeah, you're right, because it's one of those things. Nobody ever writes the technology people and say, hey, listen, my stuff worked today. Thanks.
Right.
You never hear that. It doesn't happen. It did what I expected and maybe a little bit more. Thanks.
Do you remember, like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years ago when computers would just randomly restart all the time?
Yes.
I was just thinking like, wow, that doesn't ever happen anymore.
It doesn't happen anymore. Exactly. and
wow,
you know what?
We are improving.
Yeah, somebody somewhere fixed that.
Yes.
And they'll never know.
And they'll never know how grateful I am.
Exactly. That they changed the world. That the course of humanity shifted that day. But meanwhile, they're going back to, griping about how come, I just updated this thing and these people, they want me to change this. I don't know what that's.
What is it? It's like this product that I just learned about, or this feature that I just learned about isn't working that well. And now I'm furious.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Minutes ago.
But I've never had before.
That's what I think. Patton Oswalt, the comedian, has a bit about like Wi-Fi on planes. He gets on, he's like, "There's Wi-Fi on this plane that's amazing," and then it's not working, and he's like, "Son of a gun!
This is the worst thing ever. I can't believe it.
This thing never works."
So on to our third question. Follows on from the second one. You've recently started booking speaking engagements. What would be your dream keynote?
Okay, I could come up with a few elements. I'm not sure of the title, but one element of it would be empowering people to care about their online privacy and their digital footprint. And I know we talked about that previously. I think I would like to weave in a message about our responsibility of leaving the internet better than we found it. So the internet is such a powerful force, both for good and for bad. And I do think we can tip the scales towards good and bring out more of the good in the internet and think about future generations and what legacy are we leaving behind as sort of the initial stewards of the internet. And then I think another empowerment message of you can do things that will help protect your privacy online. So it's not a situation where everything is too far gone and you have no control. And I think the message would be one of like, here's some practical things you can do to sort of start to take back some of the control of your personal data.
I love that idea of like leave no trace, but for the internet, right? Or
Yeah.
just like almost like an RV and camping ethos for our use of this internet, which is a public space and one that we
Yeah.
insert ourselves into.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I just, you and Jack are thinking the same thing. I just wonder how much quote internet litter is there floating around out there? You know, junk just that's out, and are we quote polluting the internet? You know, with that, I have to believe that there's something to that. There's something there. There's something there. I don't know what it is yet. But okay, here we are. Number 4. This is going to be a tough one. Which are better episodes of The Bachelor or Bachelorette? The ones where they fall in love, or the train wreck ones? Which are better?
There's always an element of train wreck. I feel like there is no or here. It's just an and statement. You can't escape that, even on the seasons where there is also love. And I think I'm kind of a sap. I let myself get caught up in the falling in love. And, you know, I do know that 6 months later on the dot, there will be that Instagram post that they broke up and they're calling it off. But I try to forget about that, suspend reality, and just get caught up in the falling in love. So I also think, you know, there's this fantasy world they're living in of like these fancy dates, unlimited alcohol, beautiful free vacations. And I have fun getting caught up in that. And I also think like, no wonder they're falling in love. Like, who wouldn't under those circumstances?
There is like a lot, like when you watch, one of the things I like about reality TV versus maybe a sitcom is the sitcom has to have this drama. And a lot of times people treat one another poorly in scripted drama to create tension. And then there are these moments in reality television where people are genuinely kind to each other, or they're trying to impress each other, and they're trying to be nice to each other. And I know The Bachelor and Bachelorette have much conflict between contestants, but there are these moments where people are genuinely trying to be nice to each other. And yes. I think that's a special thing about that show. And a lot of reality TV, almost in contrast, is that there are opportunities to watch people being kind. There's not a lot of that out there.
There are, for sure. I always say that my reality TV habit is like, you know, it's like eating junk food. Like I spend all day thinking so critically and having to use my brain that, you know, I recharge by watching this reality TV.
Let me just indulge in this.
It's like eating a bag of chips.
Exactly. A little whipped cream on this mental relaxation.
Exactly. I know it's bad, and I also see its value. So.
Okay, here it is, the 5th and final question. What is your favorite way to spend time with your daughter? And the follow-on is, what is her favorite way to spend time with you?
Okay. So my daughter definitely forces me to slow down, which is tough for me. I have a like underlying mental track of like, I like being productive and like, what can I get accomplished? And that just flat out isn't impossible a lot of times with a kid. And it's been honestly a really hard lesson for me the past 6 years since she's been born. And I think one of our favorite ways to spend time together is to do crafts. She's a very creative, crafty girl. And I like to use materials that I find at the thrift store, which is like where craft materials go to die. But I always feel like it's a little less wasteful than buying them new from the store. And we look up ideas on Pinterest and YouTube. And I've been noticing how that sort of, although mentally I'm usually like, yeah, you know, I don't really feel like doing a craft right now. But once we sort of get into it, I start to lose myself and like lose sense of time, which I guess is apparently a good thing for the human brain, like a flow state, right? And I think it's ultimately very good for me to be working with my hands and to physically be touching things and putting something together. It's not really a element I get daily in my digital world. So I think doing crafts is helpful and fun for both of us. And then she also forces me to get in the pool and to swim. I was a high school swimmer. I was a lifeguard. So I'm like very familiar with swimming, but it's not something I've really taken up in my adult life until she forced me back into the pool. And we always go swimming at the recreation center here, which is kind of like the community gym, like a YMCA. They have indoor pools and lazy river because we are in Colorado. And she and I love the lazy river because that's swimming, but it's also relaxing. So I feel like that's the one thing we can both get behind when it comes to swimming.
The lazy river is like one of the best like talked about inventions of the last 50 years. I don't even know how old it is, right? But every time you're like, oh, we're going to go someplace. All right, that's pretty cool. And there's a lazy river.
Yes.
Everyone's like, that's amazing. We're doing that first.
Yeah. And who would have thought? Who would have thought? What is it? It's just it's a little canal around the pool,
right?
That you
just
sit
pushes
in.
water. Although
Yeah,
at our lazy river, they do workout classes in the lazy river where you run against the river. So
wow.
it provides resistance, and you have to do aqua aerobics against the current. So that's a whole other use for it.
See, look at this. I mean, innovation just
They're
abounds.
using the lazy river wrong. You got to
Yeah, exactly. It's not the lazy river anymore.
That's exactly
the hard work river.
That's right. So it's no longer lazy. If you're, I mean, if it's lazy, it seems like it should be easy, right?
Yeah, it's not the lazy river anymore.
You have to put the current going the other way.
Yeah, and
That's
have it just
right.
push you around. Yeah.
Right. And then, okay, well, that brings us to the end of the lifestyle polygraph. As we looking for our lazy river again, because I can't stand a hard working river. I don't do it. But so Hannah, thank you very much for joining us. If our listeners wanted to connect with you, how would they go about doing that?
I would love anybody who wants to connect. I'd love for you to reach out. And probably the best way is on both Instagram, where I'm at the Privacy Chick, CHICK. And then I'm also on Twitter at HHSutor. That's HHSUTOR.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our program, and thank you for joining us. First and foremost, I have to thank my co-host, Jack Clabby, and thank you to our guest, Hannah Sutor, the privacy chick who's striving to make a difference in the world and is doing it every day, looking out for folks' privacy. So now, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the No Password Required podcast. You can find us on social media at No Password Pod. Send your comments and questions to info@nopasswordpodcast.com. And if you'd like some show swag, just ask, and we'll hook you up. I'm Ernie Ferreso, and thank you for listening. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. A special thanks goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields and Second Watch. If you would like to learn more about the show, visit our website at cyberflorida.org/pod. And if you still need more show content, check out our social media at No Password Pod.